How are they to believe him whom they have not heard? And how are they to hear if no one preaches? And how are men to preach unless they be sent? It was way back in very early times. It's not that long after the cessation of persecution that the then Holy Father, Pope Celestine, had the intuition of evangelizing the furthest part of the known world in the West through some competent bishop. Initially his choice fell upon Palladius, but he died after a year. And at that point, Providence drew the attention of the Holy Father to this young man who knew, from having lived there, the culture of the Irish. God writes straight with crooked lines. We're not quite sure where in Britain he was born. His name actually was not Patrick. We have early evidence that he had the family name given to him, but the patricius bit came from the fact that his family was of the colonizing Roman families that therefore were linked with the civilization coming from Rome. And he had, and got more as time went on, a good formation eventually in Latin, as comes through in the confession which he wrote in perfect Latin. Well, as you know, he was captured and sold as a slave. And he was only 16 at the time when he found his way to Schlemisch, where for 6 years he was tending the herds. But he was not spending his time listening to the mobile phone, at least not usually, and he was, in his own words, praying several times a day, and he was being taught by the interior master without books. He had obviously an embryonic faith, and it grew, and the Lord from within called. In such a way that he had the courage, against all odds, to flee, and it wasn't easy, because if he was caught, you know the consequences. He got onto a boat eventually, having walked and trudged for miles, and got to, eventually, back to his native area, but didn't settle there because of what had happened and was still happening in the depths of his soul. He moved on. It seems that he spent a good while in France. We know that he was, for instance, for a while at the Holy Isle of Saint-Honorat, which is off the coast of Cannes in the south of France, and where there is still a monastery, a living monastery, kept by the Cistercians to this day, Les Reims. Now, Les Reims was a carrefour, a crossroads of monastic culture, and there, for a while, was none other than John Cassian, who, you may remember, was the link with the East. He went round the desert with not a tape recorder, but a book, a notepad, and took down the notes that he was taking from the lips of the experts, the desert fathers, the experts in the faith. And they became the conferences. And St. Benedict obliged all the monks of the West to listen to the conferences every evening before Compline. And that has given rise to the present word collatio, collation, which means a small meal, because while doing so before Compline, they would be taking a little bit of bread and wine. So that's the power of the formation of this young man, who was the man for the hour. So he was made a bishop for the Irish. It was important because in a new virgin land there had to be a sacramental system in place. And for that to happen, there has to be the priesthood. For the priesthood to be there, there has to be a bishop. Now, unusually, although in his confession it comes out that he was badly treated a lot as well, because of his, as we would say, cop-on, he knew how to do so with the least possible damage, because he knew precisely how the Irish ticked. He knew the language, and that was important. And he got to the top each time. Hit the tribal head, and you've got the whole tribe. But he himself gives us to understand that initially he had a job. He was struggling for a good while, and then he noticed that something was starting to happen. He himself is amazed that the power of miracles comes through, and the Lord is working for him. And you know, in a simple land, miracles convert. And that's what happened. By the thousand. And these noble ladies were becoming spontaneously holy virgins against the will of their powerful fathers. And it became a massively monastic church. And that was a peaceful way also of conquering souls. Centers of grace and therefore Christian charity. In fact, Pope Benedict did notice in one of his writings that the main reason why, against all odds, Christianity actually won through in evangelization of the world was simply because of the power of charity. It was so different from anything else that people knew that it conquered by warmth and attraction. Remember that next time you explode. Now, that was then our beginning, and indeed our beginning locally, Slane. Even Duleek, where I live, it's in what would have been the territory of an abbey founded by St. Keenan, a disciple of St. Patrick, who made him a bishop there. Kells, of course, is a monastic setting later on under St. Columkill. All over the land we have bits of the Celtic church. But I want to make a jump in time. This huge victory of grace kept also not only the faith but learning alive in the Dark Ages, when there was a reconquest of paganism on the continent, and Ireland, the land of saints and scholars, stood out alone. Think of what happened at Kells. Those beautiful manuscripts, ours in the scriptoria, but learning also was kept alive. This then went on peacefully, poverty and pain, but peacefully until a man had a problem in England. He was actually of Welsh descent, Henry VIII. He had to have a male heir, and we know that that led to huge political upheavals, destruction of monasteries, and so on. And it wasn't long before Ireland also got involved against his wish. I just today, as an example, want to quote one testimony just to collocate things in the historic ambit, lest we forget. I mentioned that we're in a historic area here. Go a bit further that way towards the sea, not far from where I live, and you've got Drogheda. Drogheda has gone down in history because of the treatment they had under Cromwellian soldiers. I think you know about it. But other things happened there too. Are you still comfortably? Then I shall begin. We have, just an example here, a certain holy Carmelite, for Thomas Aquinas of Jesus. Now, they were trying to get information. The Puritans, having obtained information of his whereabouts, the treachery of a servant, that's often what happened, invested the house on all sides. The wolves raging for the blood of the priest, and threatened the inmates with all manner of excesses and cruelties if the papist priest were not given up to them. They searched the house in every part, but having searched in vain, retired, and prepared to set it on fire. Seeing the impending danger, Father Thomas, more solicitous for the safety of others than for his own, came out of his own accord and surrendered himself into the hands of his pursuers, by whom, in their savage exultation, he was most cruelly beaten, bound with cords, and in that state carried almost lifeless to Drogheda, and there cast into prison, where he was left to languish for a considerable time. However, he wasn't going to die so simply. He had to give witness. The Lord consoled him by the presence of another holy priest, a Franciscan, and therefore he was able to receive the sacraments. He was actually able even to celebrate Holy Mass. Early in the morning of the 6th of July, while the Father was offering the Holy Sacrifice, a messenger from the governor of the town announced to him that he was condemned to be hanged within an hour. Father Thomas received the announcement of his fate unmoved by the fear of death. He thanked God, confessed again, and prepared himself for death. When the time had come, he took at last leave of his fellow prisoners, implored the assistance of their prayers, and then resigned himself into the hands of the Puritan satellites. These men, strange to say, notwithstanding their abhorrence of all religious garbs and symbols, suffered him to retain his religious habit to the last. That's going to be significant in a minute. Holding a crucifix in one hand and a rosary in the other. By the way, remember, the devil can't bear the rosary. He doesn't want it said in the family. He wants his pulpit there, the box. Which, by the way, has been the instrument to take out of the hands of the little people the one thing that kept them alive in their faith for centuries in the midst of persecution and famine. The rosary. Holding a crucifix, therefore, in one hand and a rosary in the other, he went forth to execution, joyously chanting the litany of the Blessed Virgin. So, they tried to dissuade him by all kinds of carrots, favours that he received and so on, if he yields. It could have ended after a simple execution, but the Lord meant him to linger. His work was not done. Listen. The commander, fearing a tumult among the people, ordered the executioner to hasten his work, because he was starting to talk, you see, before execution, which gave him a good pulpit. Not without the intense amazement of the spectators, the rope, although a sound, stout one, snapped, letting Father Thomas fall to the ground, not dead, but unconscious. His work was not yet done. So the Catholics saw their intervention of divine providence. Scarcely had he revived when the commander again ordered him to mount the scaffold. But here again, the divine power showed itself, for the holy confessor ascended without difficulty, and speaking without the least trouble, he appealed to the Puritan officer to state the cause for which he had been condemned to die, protesting that his conscience was his witness, that he had done no wrong to any man, nor committed any crime deserving of death. The Puritan replied angrily, "Why do you ask of me the cause of your condemnation? Are you not a papist, a priest, and a monk? It is so. It is enough. I am guilty of no crime. Let it therefore appear to all men that I die for the Catholic faith and the religious profession for which I also die gladly." At this point, the Puritan waved some more carrots, the favours that were awaiting him if he denied his Catholic faith. Interestingly, this lucid comment comes from the martyr. Not only were the Catholics profoundly grieved by the death of the servant of God, but many Protestants as well, who, since they had dissented from the ancient faith under pretext of liberty, considered that to put anyone to death merely on account of his religion was to destroy liberty. So the martyr could play on this one. And that's going on in our time. The Irish in 2023 are being denied their liberty. Look at what's coming in, even into our schools. So this time it worked. I mean, the execution. The officer's body was taken away and interred by the Catholics in the cemetery adjoining the Augustinian convent, recently wrecked by the Puritans. God, to show that he has ever at heart the care of the honour of his servants, caused a brilliant heavenly light to shine over the Carmelite's grave on the following night. The light was visible to the soldiers, stationed at one of the gates of the town opposite, as well as to many other persons in the neighbourhood. The soldiers, being of the opinion that the light was brought there by Catholics burying their dead, went 40 strong to the spot on which they thought the light had appeared. They could see no one. All was utter darkness. They were terrified and fled. They saw it again when they returned to their station at the gate. The captain himself proceeded in the direction of the mysterious light, taking with him 50 men, but only to find the same utter darkness. He fled from the cemetery, terror-stricken. Having thus failed as a brave soldier, the captain next, assuming a more puritanical frame of mind, declared with due solemnity that the light must have issued from hell, with the devil, who had come to carry off the papist's body along with his soul. This irreverent remark, having received but scant applause from his comrades, who had not yet quite recovered from their fear, abandoning his infernal theory, the captain now swore by his Puritan soul that the papist was not buried there at all. He then showed that in this too he was mistaken, for next morning he visited the grave and found the body of the friar there calmly reposing. What happens? He stripped it of the white mantle, as the habit, and scapula, carried both away with him, and went about relating to all he met his wondrous visions and experiences of the previous eventful night. Another soldier took away the friar's crucifix, which he refused to sell to the Catholics for any price, declaring earnestly that he would cherish it all his life as a most precious memorial of a man who had been unjustly put to death. These, my friends, are our roots. Enthroned in your life, not the smartphone, not Mr. Google, not RTE, but the sacred scriptures, the rosary, and when possible, the presence of our Saviour when you can get to him. But only hear once, listen to the voice of the centuries, calm and unchanged. the silence that taught Patrick the truth without the help of the smartphone.
Nostre salutări, dice-te Dei celis. Crucifixum Messia pro nobis, sub Pontio Pilato, passus sepultus est. Ed ascendit in caelum, sed exaltes terram Patris. Et vivificantem, quid et Patre Filioque procedit.
Cum Patre et Filio semur adoratur, et cum glorificatur, villa vultus est per propetas.
Et unam sanctam catholicam, et apostolicam ecclesiam, ed expecto resurrectione mortuorum. Et con spiritu tuo